Experiencing many difficulties as Ninya reaches middle age, she takes a once-in-a-lifetime leap of faith, goes all in on her first out-of-the-U.S. travel trip with a stranger. Ninya shares it all with us in this amazing memoir. Hi, I'm Paul from Trending, Who, What, Where, and When. Today I'll be speaking with Ninya about her book, Scotland with a Stranger, a Memoir. She will be joining us from Des Moines, Iowa, USA.
Hi, I'm Ninya, and I'm the author of Scotland with a Stranger. I live near Des Moines, Iowa, and today I brought you to the beautiful Saylorville Lake. It's a place that I spend a lot of time walking and hiking and working out the latest plot lines for my latest novel in my head. Scotland with a Stranger is a memoir, and a few years ago I read the book Eat, Pray, Love, and I just fell in love with the idea of an adventure trip. And then a few really traumatic events happened in my life, and it just inspired me to take that next step. And right at that moment, a woman that I had no idea who she was contacted me through Facebook and invited me to take a healing journey through the Scottish Highlands. And I jumped at the chance. It seemed like the right person at the right time. Now, it wasn't exactly the trip that I signed up for, but it ended up being the trip that I needed. And it was an incredible journey. So I hope you join me in Scotland with a Stranger.
Tell us where you take friends and company when they come to visit you in Des Moines, Iowa.
One of my favorite places to go is the Botanical Center. It's just a beautiful facility, and I love plants and trees and that kind of thing. So I'm always a nature girl. So that's one of the really cool places. But just recently, and this week even, all the professional skateboarders are in town because in Iowa and Des Moines, they just opened the biggest skateboard park.
Really?
And
Oh,
it's really a big deal. So people are pretty pumped about that. Supposed to be Olympic quality skateboarders are in town this week, which is crazy to me. So I would love to see that.
well, tell us about your book, Scotland with a Stranger.
Yeah, it's a memoir and something that I never really saw myself writing. It was something that just kind of popped up, and I was really pulled to take an adventure trip after reading just a bunch of self-help books. I grew up kind of in a tougher situation where you kind of had a lot of negativity around. And so I used books to lift me out of that and to get more of a positive look on life. And reading a ton of things like Eat, Pray, Love really inspired me to take a trip like that. And I've always wanted to do it. And then some really kind of rough things happened in my life, and I was inspired to do it even more. And I just got the opportunity, and I thought, this is it. This is meant to be. I'm supposed to go on this crazy trip. And it just seemed like everything was lining up. And so I just took a chance and went for it.
A few times when reading it, I was thinking it didn't look like it was meant to be because it looked like there's certain difficulties. I thought, oh no, it's not going to turn out good, but
there,
it did.
there were definitely some moments where you kind of get into it and you think, at first I thought, oh, it's meant to be, and then the mind shift changed to, anything worth doing is worth fighting for.
Yeah.
So you kind of, work through challenges like that. And some crazy things happen with the airline that my partner was driving or going to be flying into, that had some crazy thing where it closed and her flight got canceled just a few months before we were supposed to leave. And it just became this wild, crazy series of events that started before we left. And then it continued on the trip. And when I got back, I thought, oh my God, this needs to be written down. No one will ever believe it
Yeah.
because it's just a crazy story.
You get more than your share of difficulties.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. Life has not been too kind, but it's turning around and I always have a positive attitude.
So what are the takeaway messages you have for readers?
I think that I feel like at any age you still should keep some type of zest for adventure and you should push yourself to try new things. That's something that I've always kind of held dear, and I do love to, think about the future and future trips I'd like to take, especially with the pandemic that sidelined all the travel plans. I this one trip was the first time I'd ever been out of the country, and it has inspired me to, I want to do more things. I want to see more of the world because it's just so amazing and beautiful, and it's interesting to see how people live, in completely different countries and what their day-to-day life is like. And so I think that's one of the takeaways. And then the other one is you get out of an experience whatever you put into it. So even with the challenges that I had with my travel partner, we butted heads nearly constantly. It was not a match made in heaven by any means. But I got to a turning point in the trip where I was like, a lot of people sacrificed for me to go on this trip. Some really good friends stepped up for me and took my daughter so that I could have the experience. And I was going to be damned if I was going to go home without having that healing, wonderful moment that made me want to do it in the first place. And so I think it's, you have to decide. You can't just let things happen to you. You have to decide to make them happen.
Did I see in the notes that you have a trip planned for Japan in the future?
That is definitely on my radar. I would love to take, my daughter is 16, so I've got a couple years to plan for that. I've always been just fascinated with Japanese culture. It's completely different than our American culture, and they're just such a elegant people. And I just really respect the traditions and that kind of thing. So for me, that would be not being able to speak the language. The language barrier would be a big one, and that I still yearn to go there and see it.
So it sounds like you've had some memorable conversations with your readers about the book that you might like to share.
I was really surprised because at first I remember having this moment a week before the book was going to be published and out there in the world, and I panicked. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is too much. I'm putting too much out there. I'm opening myself up for judgment of other people because of some things that happened that I explained in the book. And then I just had this one, I was taking a walk like I often do, and I just had this moment of clarity where I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to tell the story as honestly and authentically as I can. And I'm okay if there's any backlash about it, because I've been through the experience and I have a little more grace, I guess. And so I put it out there, and I was a little afraid because one of the people that first bought the book was one of my English teachers in my Catholic high school. And I was terrified. And she read the book and updated me constantly as she was going through it. And at the end, she sent me this most beautiful message. And she has since then supported me so strongly on all of the projects that I've decided to undertake. So that was really exciting. And I was afraid that, those beliefs would maybe get in the way of that, but it didn't. I thought for sure that I would have people making judgments on some of the things I did. And it was the opposite. I had women coming out of the woodwork that related to the struggle so much, maybe had gone through some of the similar experiences. I've had women that had dealt with addiction in their lives with their, husbands and children. And so they got it. And so it was really amazing. I mean, I still get messages daily about, how different parts have resonated with people that have read it. Erica led the way, climbing down the slippery, mud-covered rocks that were tilted at crazy angles, making the descent a little treacherous. I'm clumsy, always have been, and so I gingerly followed her, stepping where she stepped, choosing the same stones she chose. Taking my time, I occasionally hung to the massive tree roots that made up the sides of the path for balance. Then it got steeper, and there was a makeshift stone staircase with a rope handrail. I hung to it tightly, not trusting my balance or my footing on anything. The stones were muddy and damp and incredibly slippery, even in my brand new hiking shoes. Half climbing, half sliding down the steep terrain, there was a sharp turn, and then the view opened up. Stunningly beautiful. The water rushed in from a waterfall that was set deeper back. Orange rocks covered in lime green moss and lichen, vines and roots climbed up from the soil, reaching up to the trees above. It was nearly prehistoric. Seeing an untouched natural phenomenon like that had likely been there since the beginning of time was awe-inspiring and almost otherworldly. I closed my eyes and reveled in it, breathing in the scent of the fresh moving water, jam-packed with ions. That was so squeaky clean and like no other scent on the planet was beyond soothing. The best part of this, we were alone. We had the most magnificent place I'd ever been completely to ourselves. I expected something so beautiful to be crawling with tourists on a Sunday morning, but it was all ours. That was actually one of my favorite places. It was a place called Finnick Glen, and I think it's actually in one of the episodes of The Outlander, if we have any Outlander fans that love that show. It's called the Devil's Pulpit, I believe is the name of the rock formation there. And it was, I overuse the word magical in this book because Scotland is so magical. There really isn't another word for it. It's just so awe-inspiring and just like otherworldly, like something you've never seen before. I mean, at least I haven't. And so that moment just stuck with me. So I still think about it during the day when I'm, maybe having a moment and I just need that break. It's still one of those top memories that I'll carry with me forever. It's so beautiful.
Having a partner that knew Scotland was probably really useful too, because she took you to places that tourists generally might not find.
Absolutely. And I think, even after, the trip was chaotic and we bumped heads, I still have a lot of gratitude towards her for helping me have that, because I wouldn't have had half of the trip. I wouldn't have seen half of the things we got to see. Yeah. And so that is something that, I can never take away from her. The older I get, the more I see that nothing is black and white. There are shades of gray everywhere in every circumstance. We're all individual peoples whose views and values are colored by our own experiences. That's why two people can be put in the exact same situation and yet have completely different perspectives on what happened. We all see the world through the lens of our own experiences. I'm sure if you asked Erica about her trip, you'd hear a completely different story. This was mine, as true as I could tell it. Who goes to Scotland for 2 weeks with a stranger they met over the internet? I did, and it changed my life. It really did.
Yeah,
it really did.
I can imagine. Is there anything you share with us that you learned from this experience that was detailed in your book, or anything you would do differently after having had these experiences?
I would have probably spent a little more time researching my travel partner. That was probably, a smarter move. I've always been a little too trusting and, bordering on naive. And so I just assumed that everything was going to be fine. She was someone that was in a group that I was in. So I kind of felt like she wasn't, totally someone I didn't know completely, but had never spoken to her and we never had any interactions prior to the trip. So I just had this kind of false sense of it's going to be okay. And I kind of go through my life like that. And that probably hasn't been served me very well, but it actually worked out okay. And now when I look back at it, I appreciate what she did for me during the trip. And there were so many things that being with her forced me to do and forced me to grow up and grow into so that I could have the experience that I wanted. And so I went there not really having much of a voice, just being really passive and more of a go with the flow type of person. And then I think I came back with a little more inner strength and a little more willing to fight for what I want type of thing. And so I think it wasn't exactly the trip I signed up for, but it ended up being exactly what I needed.
I noticed that during the book, as I went through it, you got had more of a voice as it went on.
Yes. Yes. And if you know me, if you knew me previously, you would be shocked because I was always just very like, I'm an introvert naturally. So I usually keep a lot of things in and I don't, get too heated or share a lot of things. But as the trip went on, I kind of started to think, okay, the power's in your hands. You can't put it all on her. You can decide to have this trip that you want to have.
Of course, the good thing about making a quick decision like you did is that you did go forward with it. Sometimes when people research things, they never end up doing anything because it's not perfect and it's not the right time and they don't have the right amount of money and all these other things and they never do
Yes,
anything.
I agree with that statement. I definitely, it was, so we had planned the first initial contact with her was maybe a year and a half before we actually took the trip.
Hmm.
And so there was some time in there and I thought she was planning this trip and like, researching things, and she'd been there several times, at least 6 that I know of. And so I didn't really think about it. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to go there and hike and, kind of try to reconnect with nature and heal some parts of myself. And I don't really care what we see or do. So you just decide what we do, and just gave her like free reign to set it up for that. And so I kind of didn't over plan it at all. I didn't plan it even a little, probably, which I probably should have.
So it sounds like you started out writing when you were young by writing in journals.
Yes, I still do that. And I've been in like little book clubs since the time I love to read. I've always loved to read, to the point where I would sneak books into my math class and read them, like camouflage them, tuck them into the book and read during class. And I'd get in trouble for that. I just have always loved reading. And I thought, I could probably write a book. And so what I like to do is journal. I journal almost every day. I do it first thing in the morning, where I kind of brain dump things that are going on in my life to kind of get rid of some of this negativity, or if I'm worried about something, it just kind of is easier to put it on the page. And the fascinating thing about journaling is that a lot of times I don't really know how I feel about something until I write about it. And my journaling is always very decisive. Like, this is what I should do. Now, do I do those things that I tell myself I should do? Not all the time. But I am starting to learn to listen to that inner voice more. And journaling has definitely helped that.
Then do you do that with a pen and a paper or with a computer, the
I
journaling?
started out with a pen and paper. So when I moved, I had boxes of journals. And then I started to think, okay, this is a little crazy. Probably don't need to have these, handwritten. And so I go through and I read a few passages and laughed at myself back then. And then just probably in the last 4 years, it's been just a Google document that I pull up, and every year gets its own document. I think the first time when I started a Google document, I actually got to the point, I didn't realize you could do this, where you maxed out the characters in a Google document.
Oh, really? I didn't know you could either. I use that all
I
the
didn't
time
either.
myself. I didn't know there was a limit.
There is, and I think it's like 1 million characters or something. When you get to that point, you're cut off. You can't do anymore. So recently I decided, okay, I'll do it by year. It makes sense to do it by year.
For years, you worked in photography and also were a social media manager.
Yeah, I definitely have a photography degree. So I would love, if you are interested in Scotland at all, I have a gallery full of photos and some short video clips that really capture what Scotland was like. It was so beautiful. And I was teaching some iPhoneography classes. And so the only camera I took with me was my iPhone when I went to Scotland. And the pictures and the quality are just stunning. I mean, everywhere you look in Scotland's amazing. So it's impossible to take a bad picture of the place. But if you're interested at all, you should check out the galleries on my website.
I noticed it was really organized too. You had by chapter, you had pictures that went with each chapter.
Yeah, I was trying to kind of tell the visual story because photography is kind of my first love. I've always been an artistic person, and just recently I've started writing, like for people to read or for books. And so it's always easier for me to tell a story visually than it is to tell it with words. But having the two together is kind of the perfect world.
And then you use an iPhone for this. You like that as something to use for the pictures, photography.
Well, when I, so this is funny. People that know me before this trip, I was an overpacker. I had like,
Right.
2 or 3 suitcases wherever I went, even if it was just an overnight trip. But the Scotland trip, we were going to be hiking so much that it was just going to be a carry-on, and we were going to be there for 2 weeks.
Right.
So I scaled everything back, and I remember wanting to take my camera that had better quality, but I had to at the last minute. I couldn't take my tripod. And so if I couldn't take my tripod, it didn't make sense to take the camera too. So it got stripped out so I could be under the weight limit.
We found that works perfectly. We use that, and people are always amazed. They say, where's the equipment? And they think, that's it? Just this
I
little,
know.
I think that's
The
it.
quality. Oh, it's incredible. You have so much power in your hand with that camera. It's really perfect for any type of landscape photography for sure. And that's what you're doing 90% of the time in Scotland.
I also see that you're planning a trip to Ireland in the near future.
Yes. So I was only in Ireland. We flew out of Dublin. When we went to Scotland, we flew out of Dublin. So we were in Dublin only for a few hours. And I thought, okay, so I went on this trip with a stranger. The next logical thing would be to do a solo trip. And to be honest, like that scares the heck out of me, just to know that everything is on me, on my shoulders. So it's a goal of mine when I turn 50, which is in about 4 years, to go to Ireland and kind of traipse my way through there and just see more of the country. We only saw a little bit of Dublin when we were there.
Actually, a lot of people do solo trips and they like them because you don't have to have any agreement. Whatever you want to do
Yeah,
is how the trip turns out.
exactly. There was a moment in Scotland where I remember talking with my boyfriend back home saying, I think I want to get on a train and leave her. Like it was so good. It'll be better if I was on my own having this experience. And when I got there, I wasn't quite there in that mindset where I could tackle figuring out how to get up, get on the train and get on the plane and all the things you have to do to go have an experience like that in Scotland. So I felt like I was tethered to her.
Yeah.
But as the trip went on, I got a lot more comfortable navigating myself. I figured out some tools, that you can do on your phone, like Google Maps. You can download it and not need an internet connection. And so I was like, I could totally do this myself. And so it's kind of built in me this like big push goal to go on a solo trip like that, especially internationally. And the people in Ireland are amazing. They're so wonderful and welcoming and open and helpful that I feel like if I got into trouble, it'd be an easy place to, get some help. My biggest goal, like if I get to that place and I'm able to go to Ireland, I would love to have my son, who I talk about in the book, meet us for a couple days, or meet me for a couple days in Ireland, because he's always had a dream to go there. And so I would love to make that dream come true if I'm able to do that. Being at the cliffs of Moher with him and just, being able to like have that moment, because it's been a rocky relationship with us and we're really trying to rebuild it. And then also Iceland's on my radar too. That place is just like a different planet. It's so incredibly beautiful. Just all those dark black rocks and the beautiful waterfalls, and it's just completely different than what we see here.
So will those trips evolve into books also?
Very much so. That's my plan. Scotland was a Stranger has been my best-selling book, and so I would love to add to that brand a little more. I would love to take a trip a year at this point to be able to do that, but with the COVID has made it hard, and so we haven't done that. And I'm just trying to get my youngest graduated so I can feel like I can leave for a couple weeks and it's not going to be too hard on them. So, it's in the future, I hope. That's my plan.
So you also worked as a lunch lady while writing Scotland with a Stranger.
I did. It was a job, honestly, I never thought I would see myself ever taking, but it lined up so perfectly with what I needed, which was healthcare for me and my daughter. And the hours were just perfect. So I could do a little writing in the morning, and then I would go do my lunch lady gig and then come home and work on maybe a little of the marketing. And it was a great place. I honestly feel like lunch ladies get a bad rap. They're kind of like looked down on in society, which I think is just terrible. But being in a school, there is positive energy, at least in the school I was in. Everybody was upbeat and happy and, glad to come to work. And it was endless entertainment with the kids. It was an elementary school. And so they always had little things they'd say that would just crack me up. So, I mean, it was a great gig.
Tell us about publishing using only your first name.
Yeah. When I was going to do this originally, so my mom named the girls in my family and my dad named the boys. And so the girls in my family have weird names. And my sister, I have a sister named Kesha, who, because of the pop star, people know how to say her name. And so I laugh when I say I'm going to use my first name so that people can pronounce it correctly. So that's kind of why I did it. And it's an unusual name. So I thought, oh, it's simple, easy. Hopefully I'll start to build that name and be able to, grab attention and it'll be pronounced correctly. So, it's just a win-win.
I think you did a good job with that. When I first saw your name, it only had your first name. I thought, I'll Google that. I thought there's no chance I'll ever find this. There's no chance. And yet numerous things came up, all with your first name in it. I was impressed. You really did a good job of making it easy to find.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the background in the social media and the SEO definitely helped with that. Yes, it's very interesting because my name also means little girl in Spanish, and so sometimes I'll get people that will friend request and say things about it, and that's always kind of a giggle for me.
So you did 6 books with Ninya pen name.
I kind of made a mistake when I think about the career that I started. I wouldn't recommend doing it the way I did because I have also a series that's pretty steamy and I used my real name on that. So most authors will use a pen name for that. So I decided, I did it backwards basically from what I would recommend. But my real love is women's fiction and literary fiction. So I started a different pen name and that's Blair Bryan. And that's where all of those books are listed. Because I didn't want any crossover where someone would read something steamy and then be like, whoa, that is not even what I wanted to read. And I thought it would just confuse readers.
So you have 4 or 5-star rating and 181 reviews on Amazon for Scotland with a Stranger. Could you tell us about this accomplishment?
I am really happy and just grateful that people have connected with the book as well as they have. It's funny because I have a reader group on Facebook, and one of the questions I ask people is, have you read any of my books and who's your favorite character? And it cracks me up when they say they've read Scotland with a Stranger and I was their favorite character. So that's kind of funny. But I really feel like if you put yourself out there on the page and you say the things that are scary and you're honest about it, and you don't paint yourself as this perfect person, that people connect with that more. And I've been really lucky that people have seen that.
I think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for something that's not bland. They're looking for something unusual, and your book would be that.
It's an interesting story. And even now, it's been, some time has elapsed. The trip was 2 years ago and almost to the day. Like I almost got back. It was in May that we went. And so just, I have such fond memories of that trip and just everything that happened and transpired and all of the changes that I've seen in myself since then. It's really, honestly, I could not put a financial number on that. And when people say I can't afford to travel, I feel you can't afford not to travel. You can't afford not to have those experiences. We cheaped out. We did some scary Airbnb things. Yeah. That I don't highly recommend at all. There was some sketchy places we stayed. I felt, for the most part, I felt very safe. And, we scaled it to the bone. I mean, I'm a single mom. I didn't have a ton of money to do this. It was one of those things where, I had to stretch to make it happen. And you can go on a shoestring if you're willing to, just not be so picky about things. Just to go there and go there with less expectations and just be open. You didn't have to have everything pre-planned. You could kind of head towards the things you wanted to see. And, around noon, you'd kind of think, okay, where do I want to stay tonight? And then that night you could pull up Airbnb and find a place that was reasonable. Some of them weren't as reasonable. On the Isle of Skye, you're going to pay a lot more money, but, it was easy to find a place to stay. And everybody, for the most part, all of our hosts were so warm and welcoming. I mean, it was like just having like an uncle or an aunt let you stay in their guest room. When I realized that she hadn't planned anything, at first I was terrified because I'm used to over planning things because that's typically what I do. But it's funny when one of the things that don't know if you've never traveled internationally, and I didn't know this, was you go there and you have these like Americanized ideas and you're at this pace that's super fast, super fast, super fast. And it takes like a good week for you to take a breath and just be like, no, that's not how things operate here. And it's okay. And when you start to adapt a little more of that kind of thinking, it gets so much easier to just kind of go with the flow.
Will we see Scotland with a Stranger as a movie? And if so, who would you want to play your part?
I would love, 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 like that's the biggest dream of mine. Even on my website, there's a quote that I wrote that says, like, one of my greatest goals is for someone to make a terrible movie of one of my books. But I feel like I've been told that Kristen Bell would be a good fit. She's kind of quirky, you know, just kind of a upbeat kind of person. I think she'd be really good at it.
It looks like you're working on an upcoming book.
Yes, I have a couple of projects I'm working on right now, and they're both under my Blair Bryan pen name. And I have started kind of getting my thoughts together for the Iceland book. So I'm writing a little bit of that as I go, just my thoughts leading up to it. And so that's been kind of interesting. But the books I'm working on now, I'm finishing up a book called The Phonologist, which is a crazy story about a bipolar comedian who wins the lottery. And then his life kind of goes in a completely crazy direction. And he's a lot of fun because he's really kind of irreverent and says things he probably shouldn't. And I'm just wrapping that up. So that's going to release July 11th of 2021. And then I'm also working on a sequel to Back to Before, which was the first book that I wrote under the Blair Bryan pen name. And it's about a mom who finds her son unresponsive in a park after overdosing on prescription drugs. And it's her journey to help him get sober and to, you know, clean their lives up. And so the sequel actually takes place after that book. And I don't want to give it away because the ending is that way, but it's a totally different book. And I'm really interested to see what happens with the character and how she grows as a person. Yeah, I have a lot of like interests. I'm very much a squirrel person where I can get into I'm fascinated by things and very curious. So I like to go down rabbit holes and see where it leads. On my website, there's a store. I have some t-shirts and things like that for my kind of steamy series. And I think that moving forward, I have other things that I want to do, but I just haven't really had the time. The writing, it takes up a lot of time, and marketing takes a lot of time to get the word out. So this is an incredible opportunity to get more people interested in the book. And I'm just really grateful to you guys for that.
So you do a lot of the marketing yourself. You do things, social media and other things.
You know, I'm a self-published independent author. And, you know, I thought I come from a social media and marketing background, and I have always been a background player in the businesses that I've helped. And I just wanted to create something for myself and something that I can build up and will be something that will sustain my kids as they get older. And, you know, hopefully I'll continue to write books and grow my audience and you know, I'll see more success with it and be able to just, you know, maybe leave something for them.
I know Amazon has you highly rated in the travel area. You've got a really good spot there where people can find you easily.
That has been really lucky. And I think when I first published the book, which was last May, it kind of took off in a way that I didn't really expect that it would. I mean, I was hopeful, and you always, when you know, spend all this time writing a book, you hope that it finds its audience, but it has resonated with people. And I still am hopeful. Like you said, I would love someday to watch it on the big screen. I mean, that would be like the biggest dream come true for me. But yeah, I definitely am lucky. I for whatever reason, people read my words and they resonate with what they're thinking or feeling or going through.
And a lot of them have given you good reviews. A lot of books don't seem to get reviews like that. You have a lot of reviews, which means people must really like it, because otherwise they wouldn't put the effort in to answer.
Yes. And I mean, let's be honest, there's people that hated it too. You know, you can't keep everybody happy, but overwhelmingly, I have received so many just amazing reviews that sometimes as an independent author, you are in your own head and you're thinking, do people even read these things? You know, is it worth the effort I'm putting into it? And about the time you're ready to give up, another review comes in, or someone sends you a message, and it just is like a little hint from the universe that says, you know, keep going, it's coming. It might not be as fast as you want it to come, but you know what? You're doing the right thing. This is what you're supposed to do.
So what advice would you give to new writers?
Number one, don't use your real name when you write naughty books.
Like,
That was a lesson learned. But secondly, I would say the comparison factor is really tough as an author. You really, you know, compare yourself to other authors that are in your genre, you know, especially in some of the Facebook groups that you join to learn some of the techniques you need to learn. So it's really easy to compare what you're doing to what someone else is doing. And also comparing the beginning of your journey to like the middle or, you know, the late end of someone else's journey. So I would try to, as much as you can, just ignore that, like head down, focus on what you're doing, write the words that resonate with you. And you'll always find people, if as long as you put like true and authentic things down on the page, you'll always find an audience for that. I feel like I just want people to go for it in life more, you know, like if there's one central message to my life, I just want people to just take a chance and take that adventure and see what happens to your life because of that. And I hope people are less afraid. Like life is too short to have all of these regrets. And I'm a person that I'd rather die with, you know, with feeling bad about things that I did rather than regrets. I want to like live that life unabashedly me and, you know, just hopefully be loved for it. And I hope other people do too. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the book.